So Joe, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me this afternoon, or this morning it is.
Morning.
I've got three questions about scripture and you. Part of the commitment, and you've been a member of the Iona community for a number of years and you work with the community. Part of the commitment of being a member is, and we say this in our book, to regular engagement with the Bible and other material that nourishes us. So can you just say a bit about what this part of the rule means to you, how you live it out? Is there a particular methodology or approach or a passion that guides you in this?
Well, I think that's been quite an evolving story. I mean, I love reading, and I read a lot, and I do have always loved reading theological things and spiritual things, devotional things, as well as the Bible itself. So it's a kind of bit of both thing. So I mean, yes, the rule is there, and I'm glad it's there, and it's that sense of being held by that. But at the same time, whenever I come to the Bible or come to my other kinds of spiritual reading, I probably don't come thinking, oh, I'm fulfilling the rule by doing this. It's part of life anyway. But I do think that belonging to the community and that sense of having found kindred spirits that are also struggling with scripture and engaging with scripture in maybe what for me is a more life-giving way and a more helpful way than I might have learned before I was part of the community, then that's a bit of an indirect way that has definitely helped me in doing the reading and enjoying it. And maybe even the thing about finding kindred spirits is finding people that I can then go and have conversations with about what I've read, and that's been really interesting. And also, obviously, through my work, because I work with Wild Goose Resource Group, there's been a huge part of our work about exploring the Bible with people. So there's that sort of to and fro between things that I would be reading for work purposes and then things that would set me off on my own thinking as well, and nourish me in different ways, and seeing the way that the work that we're doing is nourishing other people, and you get their questions thrown back. And so it's a kind of lots of different ways that it kind of happens for me. So for myself, I don't think there's any one particular methodology that say here's my kind of go-to way when I approach the Bible. I think there's lots of things that I've learned and lots of things that I've tried out, and a lot of that has been through work. And maybe different things will be the sort of pattern for a while, and then I'll find another pattern. I haven't ever been a kind of I can stick with one way of doing it ad infinitum, and I've gradually come to see that as a strength and not a weakness, I suppose, or just that's just who I am, and go with it, and the pattern will keep changing, and the thing that the way of doing it that I find meaning in, or that I find the life in, that I find the challenge in, will keep changing. So, I mean, just now, one of the things I'm just really enjoying reading is just reading it aloud. Reading it aloud to myself. Just that simple thing, and reading it aloud in different ways and putting emphasis in different places and seeing how the story changes, or in a different tone of voice, reading it stridently and then reading it softly. And then see how it changes, or putting different, making different assumptions about the characters that are there. What kind of person is this who appears in this story, and what they're about, and just changing the sense of them through it. And so I suppose it's like a bit of a solo dramatizing of it and playing with it. I mean, I think over recent years, both in work and for myself, just that sense of allowing ourselves to be more playful with the Bible, and be in conversation with it and argue with it, and I mean, there's so many different things.
That's great. I mean, you said a bit about this already, but are there, the second question was about the lenses through which you look at scripture. Are there any other lenses, or maybe you've said it, are there any other lenses through which you read, in inverted commas, read the Bible?
I'm never quite sure this. I mean, I know what you mean by the lenses, but I'm not quite sure. I think maybe for me, one of the big sort of learning helpful learnings and over many years now, which would partly be a change from before I knew about the community and was part of it, and to the years that I have been, I think many years ago I had to really unlearn a lot of things that I'd learned about the Bible and how to explore it. And being given a sort of pattern in my early years as a Christian, of doing your daily quiet time with God, and you sit and read the Bible and have your prayer, and it's a solitary thing and it's your devotional time with God. And that actually worked for me for many years. And I got a huge sense of getting to know the Bible, just getting to know the texts and the stories in a way that I value and it's never left me. And it's been a real bedrock. But I also had to unlearn that sense of that the Bible is best read on your own, or that the Bible is best read, with somebody else's notes, that you're reading a kind of second-hand commentary on it all the time, rather than just saying to yourself, well, what do I make of this? But also the solitary thing has been a huge unlearning. I think having read a lot about the Bible's own backstory, like how did this particular collection of stories come to be what we now know as the Bible?
Sure.
And its own story of whose stories are they, where do they come from? When do they come from? Why were they written? And that they weren't written until a specific crisis point, probably in the exile. There's a lot of writing, but they were told and retold. It's kind of campfire type of stuff, and it's people walking through the streets, and the prophets, and it's live spoken words, over centuries and centuries that have been told and retold. So that kind of sense of these stories being part of our community's life over many years, and still part of our lives. But I think we've lost that sense of reading it in community, and reading it not for the purpose of coming at the one right answer to what this bit of text means for us, but actually to open up lots and lots of layers of meaning and lots of layers of different perspectives. And you can come at the same story umpteen times and find different things, or you can come at it as a group of umpteen people, and everyone will have a different shade of, oh, that bit strikes me, well, that bit strikes me, what, and sort of not always agree, but that's the whole point, like celebrate all these multiple layers and perspectives. So I suppose that kind of lens of seeing where it's come from, this is ancient stuff. It had its origins in different parts of the world, different social historical contexts, all that kind of stuff, different faith contexts, a time when people understood the world completely differently, took God as a given in a way that our societies in many places, especially here, don't. So that kind of sense of what is it that I'm reading, and this is somebody's story. And it's a story of their struggle in relationship with God. And that's the thing we have in common, that it's one human being, and a cluster of human beings, and then we're coming at them as another cluster of human beings. And that sense of that these are stories to live by somehow, that's why they've lasted. And we probably lost a lot of their stories, but the ones that have lasted, they've lasted because of that human testimony to their helpfulness and usefulness. And there's something, and I think in the church we often don't allow people to ask or investigate that question of why should we get to know the Bible? Because I think people struggle to read it. And they struggle with its strangeness and its alienness. And we don't often ask the question, well, why should you put in the effort? Why should you struggle with it? Why should you get to know? What difference does it make to our lives if we know the stories of David and Jacob and Deborah and all these, prophets and gospel writers, and this Jesus guy and, Paul and all these men and women in the early church? What difference is it supposed to make that we know with their stories and that we live in conversation with their stories? And I think, we don't ask that, and we don't let people answer that or see, be motivated by that it does actually make a difference to our lives that we know these stories, that we know our faith ancestors and their struggles, and you know.
And I guess that takes me to my kind of last question, which is, you know, one of the many gifts that you bring to the Iona community is your work with the Wild Goose Resource Group, and taking that question to local congregations, to a wide range of people who are exploring what worship means, what faith means, what scripture means in relation to their life. Can you just say a little bit about, and maybe give some examples of how this work with local folks exploring that very question, why look at scripture? How does that question and that work that you've done over these years impact how you read the Bible and how you see the Bible impacting on the lives of ordinary folk?
Well, fairly recently, when our working lives were still a bit more normal, for 2 years in a row, I did a series of Bible workshop days with priority areas congregations in the Church of Scotland. So we did 3 days one spring and another 3 days the following spring, and it was just all about exploring the Bible in creative ways of you know, instead of just sitting around and reading it, but creative ways into it. And at the very beginning, I'll never forget just saying around the circle, I'm just going to invite folk, just to each of you, let's just be really honest. Where are you at with reading the Bible? You know, are you reading it at all? You're reading it every day? How's it going? So just how much are you actually reading it, and how are you feeling about that? And let's just be really honest. And nearly everyone kind of would admit that they were reading it not at all or very little, or that if they did, they just got stuck and disheartened and didn't know where to go with it. And as soon as one person had said that, then, you know, and it was this sense of relief around the circle that everyone was. I think sometimes we sort of look at other people and imagine that everyone else is doing this superb Bible reading every day, and it's, you know, making them into spiritual giants, and that actually we're all struggling. And I think that is a kind of, we should have this sort of amnesty, a kind of honesty thing in the church, you know, where we just say we're stuck with this, and what can we do about it? And is that something to do with this pattern that's got into us? You know, you should sit at home and read it by yourself, and it should all make sense. So on those days, I mean, one of the things I did that just seemed to really hit a spot was just taking the whole Old Testament story in a sweep, just giving folk an overview. And literally, I just got this big sheet. It was like a double bed sheet, and I had drawn a map of the ancient world, you know, right in the Middle East, right across to, you know, Babylon as it was. So, but I mean, put in what are the countries nowadays, you know, right across Iran and Iraq and, you know, Israel and all right across. And then we just literally traced out the story, you know, using little cards for the people's names and the books of the Bible, and, you know, where do you find Abraham's story, and then who comes next, and, you know, and then where does all the kind of Noah and the Tower of Babel stuff belong? You know, it's a way kind of almost the prehistory and all these kind of legends and all that. And we literally traced it through, you know, who was moving where, what was going on, where do you find that told in the Bible, and how it's not all chronological and it's not all neat and tidy, you know. And then you've got this cluster of prophets in the end of it all. Where do they belong? And they belong in all these different places alongside all these different kings, and, you know, the thing about the kingdoms and the splitting, and then the, you know, the exile at the end of it all. And then the kind of the sense of there's no story told for several, you know, a few hundred years, and then you get the beginnings of the New Testament. And when folk just saw that, I literally saw the story mapped out, and saw the sense of how this all joins up, and that there is a joined up story in the Old Testament, and that it's the basic history is not too difficult to grasp when you see it like that. And it's just like that, wow, you know. And with the New Testament, just again, it's just simple things like, you know, we take all the letters of, and we've got the Gospels and then all these letters, but actually all the letters were written first, you know, and this sense of, you know, Paul was probably dead by the time any of the Gospels got written, and, you know, all this kind of upside down of the chronology, and you know, what came first and who was talking about who when, and, you know, and when did they come to write it down and why, and then it was being told by different people, and none of the four Gospels say it the same way, and just folk getting some hooks on what it is that they're reading, you know, and how it was constructed,
Yeah.
and how what we've got in the Bible and the sort of order that we've got it, sometimes it's not true to the order in which it was written and all that kind of stuff. And just to give folks some, oh wow, you know, and using, I love using a lot of art stuff, and you know, I mean, I would do that myself as well, whether it's, you know, writing and art, and just taking a passage and then just expressing it without any words, you know, just doing some collage or some paper sculpture or turn it into a kind of tabloid headline story. I mean, I remember one girl in the priority areas, it was a story of the wanderings in the wilderness. I think it was the bit about, you know, when they're all complaining about they've had all this manna, and then God says, right, I'm going to send you these quails, and they're going to have so many, you know, there's going to be so much quails falling down you, and they'll be pouring out your nostrils and all that, and they were all whinging. And this girl, at first she was like, this is just a weird story. And then I said, I want you to take this story and turn it into a tabloid kind of journalist style thing. And she had an absolute ball with it, and had this great big hilarious headline of all these whingers in the wilderness, and just totally got into it in a way that she just never thought that she could have, because she was given a hook that she understood. It's like, I know what tabloid journalism's like, and I know about sensationalizing something, and just to turn that into that and then go back to it, it's like, wow, what a story. What a story, you know, and get that real sense of richness at the end of it, having played with it. And I think the other example that's much more recent that I'm reminded of was last October, even in the midst of the coronavirus, John and I managed to do a trip to Denmark, and it was for a conference called Into the Books of the Bible, that we had been asked to go and do some work with the Danish church, which is quite conservative in its ways of looking at the Bible, to try and open up more creative ways of exploring things. So one of my workshops, I just took the Book of Lamentations, the whole book, and in the workshop room, before people came in, I had set up very simply just some huge sheets of black paper hanging from the ceiling, and on the floor underneath them just some upturned chairs and tables, so just looked like sort of chaos and the aftermath of the destruction, and then some big sheets of like Hessian cloth and torn clothes. So it was just that sense of, you know, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the sort of, you know, sackcloth and ashes, and there's bits of charcoal and chalk and just paper, and so when people came in, we had a few introductory sort of exercises just to get us into the feel of the story of Lamentations. What was this poetry about? And then just gave people a good half hour, 40 minutes, where I sat on the floor in the center space and just read the entire book. Well, I didn't even get through the entire book because we only had 40 minutes, and you can't get through it in that time. But I said, I'm just going to read it and just let people do whatever they wanted, whether it was sit and tear cloth, or whether it was take paper and do, you know, chalk and charcoal marks or pictures or whatever, or just lie on the ground and listen, or come and sit beside me, or, you know, just move in the space, but just let their body, let that themselves embody what they were listening to, and just do something without them speaking anything. So it was only me, it was only my voice, but they could just do what they wanted. And I'd given them lots of ideas, and folk just found that so powerful. I mean, I hoped it would be, but even more than I had, you know, sort of anticipated. And just that sense of, you know, people going around just beating their breasts and lying prostrate on the floor, and just hearing it read aloud without being able to follow the words on a page. You know, that just hearing it, and hearing the grief and the pathos and the, you know, just the extreme language of that you find in that poetry. And so I've done a lot, you know, just different things like that. Just how do we actually live and experience and retell what is there in different ways, and just let it have the effects on us that it has on us. And then, you know, and it's not that kind of, and now what will we go out into the world and do because we've read this? But it's just you've had an experience, and it's done what it's done to you, and you walk differently after that moment, and you maybe come to the Bible differently, or you come with different tools on other occasions because of that. And so that'd be one example.
That's beautiful. And I guess what you've described in my world is a form of that's contemplative action. That's what contemplation is. It's about using our full senses to hear, to listen, to feel, to engage with these powerful stories that can sometimes feel so far away, but actually, like you've described, when we see the whole sweep of how they fit into the bigger picture of faith and the faith story, they're our stories as well, and that releases us to tell our own stories of faith. Jo, thank you so much. Fantastic responses. You've triggered a lot of wonderful, for me, questions, and I'm so grateful to you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.